In August 1969, not long after the 12th of August, a gathering of key figures from the Irish government and the military in McKee Barracks near Phoenix Park in Dublin requested the presence of Colonel Michael Heffron, Director of G2 Military Intelligence. In a statement later given by Colonel Heffron, he said, "The gathering was attended by Charles Hockey, the Minister for Finance, the Chief of Staff from the military, General McKean, the Adjutant General, Colonel Emphy, the Quartermaster General, Colonel Donagh, and the Minister for Defence, James Gibbons." Heffron said, when he was in attendance, he had some conversation with all who was present. At the meeting, Mr. Hockey, Minister for Finance, stressed how important the aspect of intelligence work in Northern Ireland would be. Hockey gave assurances that his department would make funds available if required. Colonel Heffron goes on to state the normal channel for the procurement of Secret Service money was from the Minister of Defence. After the meeting, Colonel Heffron set about fact-finding with reference to the possibility of having a radio transmitter to broadcast information from Northern Ireland. He also earmarked a so-called Civil Rights Office in Monaghan, which would be useful to be aligned with in order to make intelligence work in Northern Ireland fruitful. So what's the takeaway from what you've just seen? At a gathering in McKee Barracks in Dublin, where Irish government ministers were present, the Minister for Finance, Charles Hockey, the Minister for Defence, James Gibbons, and remember this name, James Gibbons, because it is very important that people understand the Irish government's Minister for Defence was present at a gathering in where a plan was devised to permit Secret Service work across the border in Northern Ireland, a country which is part of the United Kingdom and very separate from the Irish Republic. We further learnt that money would be made available for intelligence work. It was conveyed to Colonel Heffron by Charles Hockey in the presence of James Gibbons, Minister for Defence, and a gathering of the top military personnel in the Irish state. The importance of having intelligence work carried out across the border in Northern Ireland. For this end, Irish Secret Services would use a so-called Civil Rights Office in Monaghan. We have also learnt from earlier in this documentary of the funding by the Irish state for a propaganda unit whose mission it was to ensure a narrative was spread across the world that every nationalist and republican in Northern Ireland were being subjected to inhumane brutality by the Northern Ireland state. The propaganda unit painted extreme Republicans as if they were ordinary people not involved in politically motivated activism and terrorism, aimed at destabilising and overthrowing Northern Ireland. We know that Captain James Kelly, who, as a captain in the Irish G2 military intelligence, he aligned with the leaders of the emerging Provisional IRA in Northern Ireland. He was instructed by Colonel Michael Heffernan, Director of G2 Military Intelligence, in the full knowledge of the Minister for Defence, James Gibbons, to dedicate his military existence to intelligence work in Northern Ireland, often crossing the border, participating in military operations. In Heffernan's own words, he was fully aware of Captain James Kelly's mission.